is those that come to Honours Evening aren't the most important ones in the school. And they're not the only ones to count. You all count. You all count in some way or the other. It just happens to be that Honours Evening is the easiest way that we can recognize some of the top students. But top doesn't translate to best. And I want you to remember that. Just because you get the best marks, those who are at Honours Evening, doesn't mean that you're the best students. It doesn't mean that you're going to be the most successful enough. It means you've achieved something which is commendable and recognizable, and that is that you have the ability to study and to understand information in simple thought. But there's no guarantee of success. Right? So that was the first condition I made. The first condition was I want to come back and I want to address the whole school, not just Honours Evening. The second condition that I made was I wanted to invite two very special people. The first was my best friend from Bracken. So he came here 20 years later. Can you believe it? I was finished up matriculated 20 years ago. Is there anyone here that's, okay, maybe I shouldn't be asking that question. I was going to ask, is there anyone here that's 20 years or older? Let me ask that question because, yes, I remember when I was in matriculated but the fact of the matter is, by the time I matriculated, many of you, or most of you, weren't even born yet. So I'm very old, even though I may not live that way with my man bun and rather youthful looks. But the truth is, that friend of mine that I invited was my best mate from Bracken High as well. We met in the cricket fields. So the bowling nets, down the bottom of them, Dance, who's manning the sandbox, was one of my cricket coaches back in the day. And myself and Paul met and became friends. So that was the first person I invited. The second person I invited was my mom. Okay? And she sat in the front row, right over here with this gentleman who's over here with glasses. Yes, sir, you're my mom, just so clear. But that's where she sat. Okay? And I'll tell you why later, but those were the two conditions I set up on Bracken High. So the first is, I want to address the whole school, so we check that box. So number two was, I'd like to invite my best friend and my mom. And so we check the second box. Right? And I'll give you the context around it. Now, for those of you who were here at Honours Evening, please don't ruin my jokes. They're very cheesy, and I use them again, so if you know the joke and you know the punchline, please don't ruin them for everyone else. Just try to laugh along and have fun as well, right? So that's the first thing. But really what I wanted to chat to you about is a few things. It's really about thinking about this new year, 2017 that we're in right now. What are some of the tools that you should start thinking about now, and how do you carry them on for not just the rest of this year, the rest of your career and the rest of your life? And I know, at least certainly when you get to my kind of age, sitting on the floors like this are really hard, which is why you'll see some of the teachers are standing, and some of the teachers who have been here very long are sitting. Right? Because it was very painful on the dairy here. So I'm not going to try not to speak for a whole hour, I'll speak for about 20-25 minutes. And then I'm going to open up the floor to you guys to ask some questions, and then you can ask me some things, and if there's no other questions, I'll give you some other thoughts. Right? But really the first thing I want to chat about was, and I use this, there's a huge difference between education and learning. Okay? And for those of you who are here at Honours Evening, you remember I made a controversial point that you started really, really well. You've demonstrated the ability to be educated. You've demonstrated the ability to learn. Right? And that's absolutely vital, that's absolutely important. But there's something more than education. And there's something more than being educated, and that's to learn. Right? And the question is this, how do you understand that in this world we're in right now, it's not about education, but it's about learning, unlearning, and relearning. Now, some of you may be saying, I have no idea what that means. I come to school, I come to Bracken, and my role here is to learn. It's to learn maths and science and social sciences and all the rest of it. But there's a fundamental difference between education and learning. Education is what's set. It's what is known. It's what we believe the world to be true to be and how it's always going to be. Right? And I'll give you a few of those fallacies. When I was at Bracken, many, many years ago, Pluto was a planet. If you guys have any idea what I'm talking about right now. What is Pluto now? Yeah? It's a dwarf planet, right? But it was one of the big planets that we had. The other thing that we said was we believed hominids were the only kind of species, and there was an evolution, and there was a certain chain, and that's changed as well. Right? The smallest piece that we could have was inside an atom was a proton, neutron, electron, right? And even that's changed. Now there's something called quarks and semi-quarks and all these other kinds of funny things. So even though we believe something is set, that we've been educated, we've been told, the world fundamentally changes, and so education is not fundamentally the same thing. But learning is a different thing altogether. Learning is about saying, how do I understand how something works? How do I understand the reasons for it? And more importantly, how do I understand that it may not always be the same? And how do I learn certain things that I believe to be true? And this in many respects for teachers and for your parents as well. You go home. But what is it that you believe to be true that is no longer the fact anymore? And can you unlearn certain fundamental things? Can you unlearn certain things that you perhaps thought are true and are no longer true anymore? And that's real challenge for you. So the first is unlearning, and the second is then relearning. And I'll give an example of that. Who knows what's going on in the United States tonight? Yeah, they have a new president, right? They have a new president, not close. Donald Trump is going to be elected as president, the 45th president of the United States. Now, the reason why I bring that in is, if you follow politics, if you follow current affairs and what's been going on, Donald Trump has been elected based on the promise of making America great again. And some of the rationale for that is to bring jobs back to America and to essentially create a protection state. A protection state is by saying, well, we're going to build borders, real or otherwise, and we're going to make sure that the United States goes back to where they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. The challenge is that's predicated off a world that has always been the same. And the world isn't the same anymore. The world has changed. In the United States, there are more minorities than there are majorities. Think about that. There's more minorities than there are majorities. So what that means is there's more foreigners than there are local Americans. And just by that pure demographic figure alone, he cannot return the US to what it was before. Jobs coming back from the USA, it's not a question of jobs leaving the USA, it's a question of technology. And so it's a question of saying, well, he rode almost an undercurrent of belief that he can make the United States great, but he hasn't unlearned the fundamental challenges of what they have. And the same holds true for our country as well. The same holds true for our country where we have a shifting demographic, we have different needs. Right? And the leaders of our country, no matter what kind of political affiliation you are, have to unlearn that the world is changing. And that's the world that you're all going into right now. It's a world that's changing more and more. It's an exponentially changing world. And that's really the question. The question is, can you change for that? But coming back to education for a second, and why there's some fundamental flaws with that, I read with horror at the end of last year that the maths pass rate is 20%. Was that correct? Yeah, right. Maths pass rate is 20%. Now, for those of you who are not so good at maths, that's 1 out of 5. Okay, so if you answer 5 questions, you get 1 question right. That's the equivalent of you going to one of these doors over, okay, and trying to open the door, put it 4 times. And on the 5th time, you realize that's wrong, you're going to push it and you go out. If you're in a tech, it's like saying you want to reverse out of the parking lot right now, and you have it in first. And you go first, forward, accelerate, 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 accelerate. Oh, we have to change gear. It's absolute madness. 1 out of 5 is not a mark of success. 1 out of 5 is a minimal acceptable standard. I don't know where. So even though education is changing and the barriers are lowering, it doesn't necessarily make it right. It's not a question of education. It's a question of learning, unlearning, and relearning. And it's really up to you to say, how do you learn and unlearn? So that's the first one. I touched this before, but I really want to ask the question of, how quickly is this world changing? How quickly is this world changing? Now, some of you may know, because it's kind of retro cool, vinyl, LPs. LPs, you know what I'm talking about? LPs, retro, some of you guys, yeah. Okay, so a vinyl is a big, like, circular disc thing, and there's grooves inside, and never mind, some of you won't understand it, but that's okay. But to show you how quickly the world is changing, right, maybe some of the teachers, and I asked this honestly, Betamax, you know what Betamax is? Any of the kids? Any clue what I'm talking about? Not even close, right? I didn't think so. So let me see what I've got notes over here. Transparencies. Do you still use transparencies in classrooms? Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll work on it. Right? Yeah. But transparencies is something that's back in the day, right? I'm not going to say how you can circumvent that, but there's certain ways that you can make sure you drive the teachers mad to make sure they think it's not working. But Betamax, transparencies, all these things have been phased out over time. And instead, in its gap, there's certain things that we have today, like Uber, Airbnb, Snapchat, Instagram, Vine, Yik-Yak, Tinder, Periscope. All you youngsters know what I'm talking about, right? You've heard about this kind of stuff. But I can almost guarantee that the teachers that are here probably don't know half of it, if not more. Right? And why is that? Because teachers, dare I say, you haven't been able to keep up with this changing world. You haven't been able to keep up with this changing world. The world is changing, and dare I say, and I say this to the teachers, and I say this to executives that I speak to, it's not our world, teachers. It's your world. And the question for you guys is, how quickly can you adapt to this world, both the teachers and the students? For the teachers to adapt, to be relevant, but for the students to understand the world is changing and to take ownership of the world. Right? As was mentioned before, I went to school in 1997, that's BG. Here's the first joke. Anyone know what BG is? BG? So we know what BC is, right? Yes, BC, and then there's AD. I went to school BG. That's before Google. So it's a hell of a long time ago. And that's quite important. It really took somebody there to get that joke. Okay, so I went to school BG before Google. And why that's so important is this. How important do you think it is, or rather let me phrase the question, how much do you think Google has shaped the lives of many of the people today? And the answer should be incredible. Right? Before Google, it literally was a necessity to understand facts, numbers, formulas, and the way things worked. Right now, it's not necessarily that case. You can literally open up a smartphone, you go onto Google, you can ask a question, you can get it. Right? Even right now, this year, there's going to be more voice assistant searches than anything else. You can just ask a question, whether it's to Siri, whether it's to Google, whether it's to Amazon Echo, you can ask a question, information is at your fingertips. Right? So the world has now changed to one where data was the most important thing, and it's not about data, but it's understanding, and it's about understanding how to use that information. And that is the challenge for you guys, saying, well, yes, Bracken gives you an incredible platform to learn and to understand certain things, but can you translate that knowledge into something workable and something useful, right? It's one thing understanding the pass mark is 20%. It's another thing translating mathematics into an invention or creation of your own. And so I want to ask you this question. I want to ask you this question in terms of how the world is changing. Matrix at least up there, how many of you harbor ambitions of going to university? So quite a few of you, I'm hoping. Okay, so there's quite a few, that's great. For the rest of the school, 11s and 10s, how many of you would like to go to university one day? That's great, that is an incredible number. I like it, and I think it's vitally important. Because again, university teaches you a way to think, not necessarily stuff itself. But here's an interesting fact. The interesting fact is this. In a 4-year degree, which includes most degrees and an honours, most of that information that you study, from the time you start, from first year to the time you graduate in fourth year, right, so 4 years later, most of that education, most of the stuff they teach you is out of date by 2 years. Let that sink in for a second. You start university in year 1, you finish by year 4. By the time you graduate in year 4, 2 of those years are obsolete in terms of what they've taught you. That is how quickly the world is going. That is how quickly the world is going. And that's the same reason why, if you have a look at it, a lot of people saying it's not about education, it's about learning. And I'll give you a few examples. So I spoke about Google Ross, that was in my intro. Steve Jobs from Apple, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Elon Musk. What's that? Is that for me to finish? Is that I'm too boring? Is that you're sorry, Craig, you're boring, it's time to finish up. Okay, let's get around really quickly, right? So here's the numbers. So Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, none of them finished off the university degrees. So they've got a lot of them got undergraduate degrees, but some of them finished out and they pulled out of PhD programs. So they don't necessarily have a formalized education, right? Same as Zuckerberg. But you can't trust that with guys like Warren Buffett and Carlos Sim. Does anybody know who Carlos Sim is? Carlos Sim, very rich Mexican telecoms entrepreneur. He's at times, depending on the exchange rates, he's the richest man in the world, right? And he has a formal education. The difference between both of these groups, the ones that finished universities and the ones that didn't, was both groups understood the importance of learning and unlearning and changing the world. So I come back to the point again. It's not about the education per se, but it's the ability to learn very quickly and understand and surround yourself with the right people. So I was chatting to a friend. So that's the second point. And so here's the third point. Right? I'm going to set this up. I was chatting to a friend before honest with you, and I said to him, I'm going to come back to my old high school, Bracken High, it's in the south, and I'll be chatting with them. And he said to me, get it, guys, so honestly, please don't do this joke for everyone else, right? But what's the best thing to come out of the south? And he said the M1. Really? Sean, you didn't? Oh, wow. Okay. That took a while. Okay. Wow, that was shocking. Yes, okay. But that's not true, right? That's not true. And the reason why I put that is this. There are certain things that you can't change. You can't change many of the contexts that you are right now. So I came from Bracken High, rightly so. Right? So indeed, maybe the M1 is one of the things to come out of the south, but it's not the best to come out of the south. I believe the best thing to come out of the South is sitting in front of me. Right? Yeah, it's true. It's true. And I said it like this. And I'll tell you why. So Bracken High, this school that some of you have been here for 4 years, 3 years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This little school called Bracken High is an absolute gem. What was the pass rate last year? 100%. And it's been so for the last couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. It's been 100% pass rate. Right? 100% pass rate is an absolute achievement, and it's nothing to be scoffed at. Now I know again, because I was there albeit 20 years ago, right? There's some of you are sitting here going, gee, this is a Bracken High place, I just want to get out of here. I just want to get out of this place, I want to go live my real life, I want to be out of school uniform and away from these teachers. But take a second and reflect upon what 100% pass rate means. It means that for the last couple of years, every single person, every single one of you kids over here, not only finished, but passed, and made it into the quote-unquote real world. Right? And so the best thing to come out of the South is indeed you. The question is, and the challenge is for you, is how do you ensure that you can be that polished thing? How do you come out and become polished from a piece of coal, which is what you are right now, to a diamond, so that everyone knows about you? Right? And I'm going to set another challenge for you. We're on the verge, potentially, depending on who you ask with Johnny status. I don't know if you know what that means, but essentially what that means is internationally, it doesn't mean that South Africa is a place for international investors to invest in. Because I say we don't believe we're going to make a return on investing in South Africa. So we're very close. If we get Johnny status, there's a lot of challenges for this country. It means that we can't lend money as a country. It means we can't go get cash overseas. It means investors will pull out. It means the economy is really struggling. Right? But they've looked at across a number of different countries across a number of different years. And it takes on average 7 years. 7 years for a country that goes into Johnny status to come back out. Now, why is it important? Well, for the guys at the top over there, the average age in 7 years' time will be 25. 25 years old, right? So 25, 24, 23 in 7 years' time. And the challenge I put to you in 7 years' time, coming out of the South, is what will you achieve by the time you're 25, 24, 23, 22, and so on and so forth. Zuckerberg was 20 when he started Facebook. He was 20 years old when he started Facebook, right? Larry Page and Sergey Brin were 24 years old. So in 7 years' time, if we hit Johnny status, by the time we get back to investment grade, you'll be at that age. And the question is then, are you doing anything, and are you doing amazing things to bring the country back to where it should be and make us compete on an international stage? So in 7 years' time, where will you be? Where will you be, and what's the challenge, and how can you change it? And the only way that's going to get you there isn't a circumstance that you believe to be true, but it's governed by the ability for you to think, and the ability for you to dream, and the ability for you to believe that you individually, you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, are the best thing to come out of the South. That's the question. It's the ability for you to believe that you are not only the best thing to come out of the South, but potentially the best thing to come out of South Africa and to compete on the world stage. That's the challenge I put before every single one of you. And how does that start? That starts by saying, I'm not comfortable with what I have right now, and I want to do more, I want to do better. And in order to do that, you need to do certain things. And one of those things is to not blame your circumstances. Right? And I don't think you do it here, at least I hope so. I hope you don't. In fact, I know that Bracken does not encourage that kind of thought. But in our country, we've got a blame culture. We've got a culture saying it's not my fault, it's someone else's problem. Right? That's not true. If you want to succeed in life, one of the things you need to realize is that it's all up to you when you're connected to everyone else. But more importantly, don't blame everyone else. Take responsibility. Take responsibility for your actions, and more importantly, take responsibility for the actions that you have to change it. Right? Now, I'm a Chinese guy. Now, 20 years ago, there weren't many of us Chinese guys floating around Bracken High. I still don't think there are many, by the looks of it. See you. But there's certain things you can't change. And that's one of them. You can't change your nationality. You can't change your life context. You can't choose whether you come from a rich family or a poor family or middle class family, which is where I came from and many of you came from. Right? You can't necessarily choose what hand life plays you. You can't necessarily choose to say, well, I hope that I win the lotto tomorrow. And I hope this happens, or I hope that happens. You can't hope for that. But what you can do is you can create the future that you want. You can choose your dream. You can choose the path you want to follow. And you can be passionate about that and start growing that today. That's really what you can do. Right? And so you need to decide if you're going to use your circumstances as a reason for you to fail or a reason for you to succeed. Now, as was mentioned during my intro, I come from the USA. So yes, I may as well have studied in the United States of America, but the other USA, the undeniable streets of Elton. Yeah, geez. That's even such a larger, isn't it? That's a nice There was one thing that when I was chatting to Mrs. Woolway, she says to me, please don't encourage the students to go to the other USA. Please don't encourage them to go to the USA. I'm not encouraging you all. But there is one thing that I have a disagreement with, and that is that you must travel, that you must see the world. You must go understand how things work, how things operate. You must expose yourself to new things. You must question. Question, because it's those that question the status quo that have the ability to change. Right? But more importantly, it's not to leave South Africa, but it's to go understand certain things and then to come back. It's then to come back to South Africa. So by all means, if the desire is there and the passion is there and the ability is there, go travel. Go travel, but come back to South Africa because that's where we need you. Right? We need you to make a difference, and as I said before, it's a challenge of 7 years, so keep your time over here. Okay? So I've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to touch on the last point, and I'm going to ask questions. Okay? And I'm going to take questions from you, or I'm going to ask questions. So as I said, right at the beginning of my talk, I asked that 2 people had the ability to be invited to my Zoom meeting. You remember who they were? Yeah, it was my best buddy Paul and my mom. Right? Why did I do that? Well, it's pretty simple. Right? Think back to your family. So I want you to think about your family right now. For 2 seconds, just think about your family. Okay? You've mostly thought about mom and dad and maybe your siblings, right? So sister, brother. Some of you may have thought about a cousin. Maybe some of you thought about an uncle, aunt, maybe grandparents, etc. But most of you thought about mom and dad and sibling. But the truth is, family goes more than just that. Obviously, it's more than just your nuclear family. Family are the people that support you in a way that you don't necessarily understand. And I'll give you an example. My mom didn't come from a rich family, right? And neither did my dad. In fact, my grandparents were immigrants, so they came to this country during the Second World War, and as a result of which they had to work from the bottom up. As a result of which my parents, didn't have access to a lot of different things, and they struggled financially. And my mom shared the story with me one day. And I don't have the story you can relate, so I hope it is. But take the significance of the lesson. My mom was called to the principal's office the one day. And she was called, and she was young, she was 14, 15 years old. And she went to the principal's office, and the principal said, Cynthia, is one of my mom's names, Cynthia, please come down to the principal's office, we need to see you. So she went down to the principal's office, and her dad was my grandfather. And my grandfather was there with a bottle of coins. And the reason why they were both called, my grandfather and my mom, was because my grandfather hadn't paid school fees. He hadn't paid school fees, and they were going to kick my mom out of school. But my grandfather had literally scraped every single cent that he could find, and he came with a jar of coins. And they counted out the school fees from that jar to pay school fees so my mom could carry on to school. Now, why do I say that? It's because many of your parents, many of your family have sacrificed in ways that you will never understand, and they will never tell you that. They will never tell you the sacrifices they have made to ensure that you can come down. Many of your parents didn't go to university. Some of your parents didn't go to high school, right? But they made sacrifices. And it's not just your parents, it's your uncles, it's your cousins, it's people that support you when you're writing exams. It's people that support your family to go through some kind of terrible circumstance, and they're the ones to get you through it. I'll give you another personal example. In 1997, on the 1st of September, I sat somewhere over there, 3/4 of the way back, and I wrote my maths final, I think it was in September. The interesting thing and why I remember the 1st of September was 2 things happened that day. The first was Princess Diana had died that morning. So some of you teachers may remember that. The other thing was this, was my grandmother passed away that morning. My grandmother passed away the morning that I wrote my maths final. That's from the trip. And the support that I got from my family was more than just for the trick, it was for a life context. And it's part of the reason why I'm able to be here today, because they supported me through. Right? So do me a favor, go home today, give your mom a big hug. Give your dad a big hug. Guys, matrics, I know how hard it is for you guys to go to your dad and give him a hug because it's not the man you can do. But do it for me. Do it for me. So that's the first thing, right? So I invited my mom. The second person was my best friend Paul, who's been my best friend for the last 22 years. 22 years. Now the reason why I wanted to invite him in addition to my mom was this: you become, on average, you become the person who you associate with the most. So, sorry, let me start again. You become the average of the 6 people you associate yourself with the most. So think about the 6 people that you spend the most time with, and you become the average of all of them. Okay. Now, for some of you, you giggled. Some of you, you're like, maybe that's not a good thing. Some of you are like, yes, I got such a great friend. But choose your friends very, very carefully. Choose your friends and associations very, very carefully. Once you leave this place, once you leave Bracken High, once you go into university, once you become older, the number of people that you associate with are more and more important as you go on, and it's more and more difficult to change the association of people that you have. Now, as mentioned, if you looked at the board over there, back 1997, you'll see my name over there. You'll see one little board, which means I wasn't the smartest guy around, but I made it into the scoreboard. Okay, so that's okay. But many of my peers have a lot more. They did a lot more than me. The question that I would ask them if they were here today is, what did they do with their lives? And what was the influence of the people they surrounded themselves with? Was it a positive net or was it a negative net? So choose your friends very, very carefully, because the friends around you are the ones that motivate you, the ones that demotivate you, the ones that put you down, the ones that give you ideas, the ones that challenge you, the ones that tell you when you're wrong, the ones that tell you when you're right, the ones that hold you up, right? And the ones that are there when your family can't be. Think very, very carefully about the 6 people that you associate with, and make sure they're the ones that you want to spend time with. And so those are the 4 things that I wanted to share with you. I'll give you them again. There's a huge difference between education and learning. Education is one thing. You get a great education at Bracken High. The education to understand certain things and to understand how the world works is fundamentally important. But there's something greater than education, it's learning. And it's the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn certain factors that's going to determine if you're successful or not. That's the first point. The second point is the world is changing very, very quickly. You can only keep up with this world if you understand the world is changing and you can embrace that first lesson that I said to unlearn. But more importantly, it's not about embracing the change, it's about driving the change. It's about saying, how do I embrace the change, and how, in the words of Gandhi, is how do you become the change that you want to see? Right? There's a question for you there. The third one is background means nothing. You sit here today with a certain context, whatever that may be, whether it's a certain race, with a certain income bracket, whatever it may be. You come here with a certain kind of context. You cannot change certain things. You can't change the past, but you can change the future. And therein lies the key. Don't be emotional about the past and rational about the future. Rather be emotional about the future and rational about the past. Be rational about the past. Be rational about the things that have come and that you cannot change. Be emotional about a future that you can create. And the last lesson is this. Is recognize the value of friends and family. Recognize the importance that your family gives to you, the importance they do, and everything they do behind the scenes. A lot of things you don't see. Enjoy the time with your family. And also choose your friends and associations very carefully. You become the net average of the 6 people around you. So those, and I've got about 10 minutes for any questions.